So we have a nice, beautiful blend with our blue. So continuing on, let's watch me do that one more time, and then we're going to go in and talk about layering. So I'm going to take a little bit more blue, get my edge nice and clean. And then I'm going to clean out my brush. Make my bridge. And again, notice how I'm pulling it down from right here. I'm not trying to pull it down from up here, because that's just going to make everything the same color. And you want to have that progression from light to dark. That's why we're practicing the Zentangle, or the Zentangle patterns. Okay. And then I'm just going to bring that down. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about layering. So let's say now that these are dry, you wanted them to be a little bit more red. So I'm going to come in with my red. Now that it's dry, I can add more. Always, always, always want to layer. That's why watercolor is kind of difficult, because it's a lesson in patience. You have to wait for things to dry, and that can be kind of challenging because you guys have never had that experience before where you have to wait. Normally, if you want to fix something or resolve something, you can very easily. So, and you can see how much darker it is. Now if I want it to go darker, I'll wait for this layer to dry and do another one. You can also come and clean up that guy too. Always have paper towel in front of you to blot your paintbrush. Again, a little bit of paint. Just a little bit of paint and water. Clean my brush out every time. You'll see the second layer. It's kind of like with scratch art, or even with a drawing project. Once you get that first layer of paint, you can layer it on. Paco, no. Come here, right now. Okay, now I'm going to add a second layer of green right here. I'm going to use a different green just to kind of mix things up a little bit and get a two-toned feel. So right here, I'll add a little bit of this green. Paco, no, come here. And then I'll kind of blend in with that lime green. I can also add a little bit of, let's see. Hold on real quick, I'm gonna go get my dog. Paco, come here. Come here, get out of there. Go ahead now. Now I can add a little bit of orange to the edge right here and pull that up a little bit. Now that it's dry. So notice how I'm holding my brush kind of at a low angle. I waited for this guy to dry entirely before I started in with the orange. Otherwise they'll smear together. Again, another lesson in patience. And then right here. So again, I lay down my paint, get my edge perfect before I start doing my blending. And again, just right before I need to start blending, I always create that little bridge and just kind of pull it up. Anytime you feel like the orange is going to keep going, you clean your brush out. Layer in a little bit of darker green. Again, just follow my brush right across the edge. This will become easier and easier with every shape. The bigger the shapes, the better, but you don't want them to be too large or else you're not really going to teach yourself too much here. You want them small enough kind of because the clouds that you guys are going to be painting have lots of little shapes, so you want to practice with all those little shapes. Okay, and maybe I want to add a little bit of raw sienna, which is that kind of amber honey color, into the top half of these. I could have done that when the paint was wet too, but I like it better like this. I like to paint with dry layers, like waiting for each layer to dry is a lot easier for me to paint. But I like to have a lot of control if you want it to be a little more like the Agnes Cecilia videos where she's painting and everything's kind of smearing together. You just use lots of water and you don't need to worry about anything kind of drying in layers. Okay, now this guy's not looking so happy, so I'm just going to bring in a little bit more red along my edge. Kind of clean that up a little bit. Okay, so now let's talk about how to do some nice washes. So over here, whenever you want to do a nice big area and blend it, do kind of like the videos you've been watching at the beginning of class, use a little bit of water, well actually a lot of water. Wherever you put it, it's only going to go where you place it. So none of the paint's going to smear into this area. It's only going to go into this area. My water's a little dirty, which is why it's kind of staining the paper, but I'm going to use some darker colors here, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm moving very quickly. Notice that I painted this whole area. I'm not too worried about getting it perfect, but I painted this whole area with water in about, I don't know, a handful of seconds. And then you just let it kind of bleed. So if any of you did the silhouette project and did the watercolor technique on the canvas, it's pretty similar to that. You just let it sit and do its thing. So along here, I'll kind of zoom in so you can watch the process. I take my paintbrush with lots of pigment. You want to get lots of paint here. Guide it along the edge, and then you use more water and let it do its thing. Notice how that was like 3 brush strokes with smearing it. You don't want to overdo it. Also, don't forget, leaving white on the paper is really helpful and important. It also maintains the integrity of the watercolor itself. So it'll look like watercolor when you leave some of the paper. So again, we'll come up to this corner edge. I have lots of pigment on my brush. I'm going to dip in and get a little bit more. Make sure I get my edge here perfectly. Notice how I'm angling my brush sideways. I'm not painting like this. I'm just right along the edge. Clean that up. And then I'll take some water. Couple little brush strokes, and then let it sit. If you overwork it, it's going to turn everything the same color. Okay, so down here, we'll just do a little bit more blue. I'm going to do a ton of blue. It looks like my water's dried, so I'm just going to add a ton here. Don't let this area dry because you're getting too much paint, because then it'll stick. You'll get that little line. You can kind of see it right here. Everybody look on the screen. If you don't blend the paint quick enough, you'll get that line where I first applied it. You can see it's right there. So you may need to add more pigment to kind of cover that up, which is what I'm going to do right now. Whoops. Add a different blue. Now keep in mind, you guys are using not the best paper for your practice right now. You're going to use a much better paper. You can see, I don't know if you can tell, but it's curling right here. Your paper that you guys are going to be working on for the actual sunset's going to work a lot easier on you. It's going to be a lot easier on you. Okay, so now I'm thinking we probably need a little purple. So I'm going to make a little bit real quick by just adding some red and blue because I don't have any on my palette. And I'm going to go along the edge here. Add a little bit of red. I encourage you to blend your own secondary colors. It's really good practice, especially if you're planning on coming back for intermediate or advanced. Secondary colors are colors like purple, orange, and green. They're combined by blending 2 primary colors together. So red and purple, or red and blue, create purple. I'm just using a little water. I'm going to start to pull it around. Now, if you guys did run out of time, you're going to want to make your patterns a little more detailed since this is your final watercolor. But like I said, if this is just for the sunset and you're just practicing, make sure your shapes are nice and big so that this whole demo doesn't take more than probably about, I give you guys about a week to finish it. You don't want to spend any more time than that, because you'll learn a lot when you start your actual painting. So I'm just using a little bit of water to fade that off. Coming back over here and cleaning that edge up as best I can. Lots and lots of water. Mix a little bit of my purple again. Notice how I always focus on my edges. I'm not eager to paint everything, just what's wet. I'm not gonna, in other words, I'm not gonna try to paint all of this right now. I'm just gonna focus on these small areas every single time while they're wet, because if they dry, it's really hard to blend it this way with the wet on wet technique where you're using wet paint on wet paper. And again, just a little bit of water. Notice how I started my bridge right here. Everybody look on the screen. My brush is not hitting this paint here, but right here. And then when I pull it across, I'm not going back in here. I'm just working with what I have. I'm gonna make that a little bit more purpley by just adding a little bit of red to my brush. See, that's what it's kind of cool to make your own secondary colors, because you have control over the type of purple that you make, or the type of orange, or type of green. Lots of water before this area dries. It seems like I'm working really slow, but I'm really not. Just let that sit and do its own thing. Okay, so we're coming together. So now I think I'm gonna go for a little bit of yellow. Right up the center here. Using a little bit of water, pull it up.